Good evening, everybody, and welcome live from the Donatorium. It's another episode of the Fat Minute. I am, of course, your host, Don John, joined tonight by my co-host, BVJ.
Hello.
So, how you living, Blake?
I told you I had a lot of getting even to do.
How'd it go?
I'm still odd.
Well, there's always next week.
Yeah. Thanks, Pinky.
But on tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about a bit of a broad subject. We're just going to be talking about kind of like artists' rights, the rights and ownership of artists and content creators, and how a lot of studios and record labels and stuff like that take advantage of them hardcore. We're going to talk about a few specific incidents. This idea originally was suggested to us by a viewer on Twitter. Name's Kira. She messaged us and suggested we talk about the recent events involving Taylor Swift and her music catalog. And we kind of expanded it a bit to, go across all forms of entertainment for the most part. So let's, go ahead and jump in with that original request.
Time out, Kira, if you're listening, I know you might be thinking right now, what the hell, Blake? You know my real name. I know you, but I just went by your Twitter name just to be safe because maybe that's just what that's what you're comfortable with being publicly mentioned as. So, yeah. I didn't want you to think I didn't know who you were on Twitter. I know. So
it's part of his getting even.
Yeah, just making certain people believe that I don't remember their name in real life. Yeah.
But let's go ahead and jump into the original, the original suggested topic, which was the whole issue with Taylor Swift and her music catalog. I believe it was like a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago that this started. When
I think it was 2019.
Yeah, 2019. So almost 2 years ago at this point. Basically, big music label executive by the name of Scooter Braun, which, first off, his name's Scooter, so you already know he's nothing but trouble.
Well, yeah, when I first heard that, I was like, no, for real, what's his name?
Yeah, is that actually his legal name, or is it like...
Yeah, I honestly just don't give enough of a shit about him to even look that up.
Yeah, his name's Scooter. Don't trust him.
Here's the thing. It's either a name that he chose himself or it's a name that he continues to go by, and I don't know which one's worse.
Right? But basically, long story short, this guy, Scooter Braun, he and his company, his music label, had ownership of the masters, which is basically the original recordings of all of Taylor Swift's first 6 albums. And he recently sold it to another company that has nothing to do with her. And Taylor Swift is obviously pissed because, that's her music. She basically has no ownership over her music in terms of, where it can be used, how it can be recorded, And apparently when Scooter Braun, before he sold her music, was even telling her, she couldn't play music from her old albums at live performances and stuff like that. Basically citing some clause in her contract telling her that it counted as her re-recording it, which she apparently wasn't allowed to do according to the contract. And it's just so mind-boggling that you put in all this time and effort to make this music, and somebody else is just allowed to tell you that when and how you can play it or can't play it.
Yeah.
And then they can just straight up sell it to somebody else. And I mean, to Taylor Swift's credit, she's doing a boss move where she's re-recording all of her first six albums, and she'll have complete ownership over all that. And there's another incident like that we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, it's just so crazy that something something like that can happen.
So, first of all, I have never been a big music person. I love music. I listen to music, obviously. Saying you don't like music, that's like saying you don't like eating food. It's just kind of weird. But I think you know what I'm talking about or who I'm talking about when I say we all know those people that are really into music, more than everyone else we know. I was never one of those dudes that had in his MySpace bio, "Music is my drug of choice."
Right.
Because we all had that friend.
Yeah. We all had several of that friend.
Yeah, but so I just was not familiar with this term, masters,
Hmm.
and I'm assuming it can be used with anybody. It's not just a Taylor Swift term right now.
Right.
Um, but yeah, when somebody brought that up, they're like, "Oh yeah, her masters," and I'm like, "What's that?" Like I had no idea what they were talking about, and they explained it, and I'm like, "That's a thing?" And they're like, "Oh, it's basically like the hard copy, the original copy of like all her songs. It's like what gets played and whatnot."
Hmm.
So I just knew it as like the song, like the official version, the real, the digital version or whatever. But yeah,
Hmm.
like whenever it's used or remixed or whatever, it comes from that. Um, but then somebody explained to me the concept of like how basically everything you just said, and I'm like, that just sounds so frustrating.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, no wonder why that industry has so many snakes and so many like so much controversy, you know?
And it's no wonder
Um,
that they get no sympathy when they complain about digital downloading.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's why like a lot of artists go on tour as much as they do because
Hmm.
they're trying to make a decent buck. Because like as far as like
And
from my
even then, that's not guaranteed because I remember reading an interview with Dee Snider from Twisted Sister not too long ago,
Mhm.
and like I think he said it was like a little over 20 years before like Twisted Sister actually started making money from royalties and stuff like that, and like he said it was so bad that during like the 90s he was doing like odd jobs like answering phone calls at offices and stuff like that just to feed his family because they hadn't started making money yet.
That's depressing, especially from my point of view. How cool of a guy D. Snyder always seemed like.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so like no, when they get streamed or when it would be purchased off like Apple iTunes, like apparently the artist did not make that much money off of it.
Maybe a
Um,
couple pennies.
yeah, not that much of a percentage, I should say.
Yeah.
'Cause, you would think, when you're younger and you don't have much of an understanding of that, I just assumed that 99 cents went directly into their pocket.
Right.
Um, but no, it's just, and then I mean, it's been a thing. It's been common knowledge for a while for me that like writers in the music industry have always gotten treated like shit.
Mhm.
Because I mean, like, unless like Lady Gaga, she started out by writing Britney Spears lyrics, and Ed Sheeran has apparently written a lot of songs for other people.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest things is the song "I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston. That was by Dolly Parton.
Mhm.
Um, but so unless you're already famous with other stuff, like if you're a writer writing lyrics in the music industry, like you're gonna get fucked over. Like
Yeah.
that's just a given. Um, this guy. I mean, just imagine like the metaphorical balls you have to think you could get in Taylor Swift's face and tell her what she can and can't do, and then not expect for her to just like pull your name through the mud, which is like what she is an expert at.
Right.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
man.
she's not the only one to have done this. Back in the 80s and 90s, Prince was in a similar situation with Warner Brothers where they were fucking with him and his contract that he had with them. And he was just like, I want out. And he's like, well, too bad. They were like, too bad. You still got to do like this many albums with us. And he was trying to buy his masters off them, and they wouldn't do it. So this was the time. This was what caused him to change his name from Prince to the quote unquote love symbol for a while.
Yeah, the artist formerly known as Prince.
Right. That's what caused him to do that, and caused him to put out like a shit ton of albums over like one right after the other to get out of that contract, but also because he was like, if you won't sell me my masters, I'm just going to record all that music all over again, and it's just going to like completely devalue that catalog, and literally what Taylor Swift's doing now.
Yeah,
And like I said, it's just so crazy that like these record labels can just own that shit that you put all that work into, especially artists like Taylor Swift and Prince who I don't know about Taylor Swift per se, but I'm sure she wrote at least the majority of her music
Oh no,
herself.
no, that is one of like, for all the gripes people have of her, like, it almost became a meme where it's like
Hmm.
every song she has is about like a boy she's pissed off at or whatever. Like, one of the things everybody was always able to give Taylor Swift is she at least wrote her own shit.
Right.
Like, it's not like a lot of other artists where it's like you did not write any of that.
Yeah. And
And
it's
yeah.
just crazy. You put all that work into it, and you have no like real say in where it goes or what's done with it.
Hmm.
And I've heard the argument before that like the record label deserves, I guess is the word I'm looking for, to have that control because they're the ones providing the equipment and the studio and the space, and they're making the album and promoting the album and doing all this other stuff. And it's just like, they have to make their money back, and they have to pay the people, the engineers, and everybody who helped make the album. It's like, sure, those people got to get paid. They worked too, but it's like the record label's making a cut off the album sales. They're making a cut from the ticket sales from the live tour. I'm sure they're making a cut from the merchandising sales. Like, they're making their money back. So, why do you still need this?
Yeah. Yeah. It, and it's just such a hard fight to argue because it's like ultimately like, they can use the cop out of, well, that's business. That's the whole point, is they want to make as much money as possible. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to argue for the sake of like a fairy tale dream world that, everything's fair and whatnot. But I mean, it's just always been notorious that record companies are, you know, shady and miserable to deal with
Mm-hmm.
and everything. I mean, it's just kind of like random and irrelevant right now, but it reminds me of one of the loading screens in Guitar Hero where it's just like, remember, every record company is evil except the one that was willing to sign you.
Yeah.
um, shit. I mean, like, yeah. So you had the artist formerly known as Prince. What other musicians would you say is a good like example here?
I mean, another recent one. It's not quite the same situation, but it's just another example of how the label really keeps their artists under their thumb. A couple years ago, Kesha was trying to sue to get out of her contract with her record label because the head of her label, Dr. Luke is his name, she accused him of harassing and assaulting her.
Yeah, yeah.
And she sued to get out of the contract with them because she was still under contract to do 6 more albums with this label. And
Jesus.
she's like, I don't want to make a label for this. I don't want to make anything for this fucking guy. And she
Yeah.
lost. She
Yeah.
lost, and she made another album, and it was still released by this dude's label. And it's just like that is so fucked up that like
And that was with Sony, right? That was Sony or whatever.
I'm not sure. Let me double check. But it's just like being forced to work with someone who did those things to you.
Yeah. And I mean, like, those were heartbreaking pictures to see of her, like, crying and breaking down in the courtroom or whatever. And it's like, she's not even trying to get a bunch of money from him. She's not, and I mean, like, she would deserve such.
If
But it's
anything,
like,
she's almost kind of walking away from money because it's like, she's trying to walk away from a record label that will release her music.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, this isn't her, like, trying to, like, take him for everything he has. This isn't her trying to, like, send him to jail. She just doesn't want to work with him. That's it. That's all she wants. She
Right.
doesn't want to have to work with somebody that, like, fucking assaulted her. And
Right.
it's, like, the most reasonable request, and she lost.
Right.
Like, it was very hard to believe in the system that day. Um, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Sony.
It's
Um,
a yeah, it's a subsidiary of Sony. It's not like Sony directly, but it's a label owned by Sony, so same difference really.
right, right. Um, yeah, no, that was terrible. I mean, like, and she's. I don't think I've seen her. I don't think I've seen or heard anything of her since that first that first one she came back with. I mean, that was the first one in a long time too.
Yeah.
Like she looked different, she sound different. But no, I mean, whoever that person is, fuck him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately going to be the ongoing theme of the night. Is
them.
going, fuck him. Yeah, shit. But back to you though.
Well, the move from music, let's go into movies a little bit. Like, did you read the article? It was like end of 2019, a little over a year ago at this point, that this article came out about how like the writer for the original Men in Black movie like had a couple Twitter posts talking about how 22 years later, and he still hasn't gotten paid royalties from Men in Black because it's technically not made a profit.
Now it's ringing a bell, but I'm not 100% sure. Like, was Home Alone on this list as well and whatnot, or?
I think maybe, but like basically it's just like there's a very like common practice of movie studios using creative accounting to basically keep movies that they put out technically in the red so they don't have to pay out royalties to a lot of different people.
Again, that's shitty.
Yeah, like I remember in this Twitter conversation that like the writer of Men in Black started, the director of Spider-Man Homecoming pitched it, and he was like, yeah, that movie Homecoming made like $800 million, but I'm still like not getting residuals because apparently it hasn't turned a profit.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
You gotta be kidding me. I mean, that should straight up be illegal.
It technically isn't because technically the numbers don't lie. And I mean, somebody ended up releasing like the accounting sheets for Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, I think it was, to show how it hasn't made any money either. And it's just crazy, the accounting and like just the math that they do to make it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'll definitely have to look into it more, but it's weird how, like, how's that even possible? How do you even, like, warp the books that way?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I'd be fucking pissed off, too, if I directed Spider-Man Homecoming and I still hadn't gotten any money for it. Like,
yeah, I'm looking at the tweet now. He's like, according to my latest Spider-Man Homecoming statement, the movie is still losing money despite a box office of $880 million.
I mean, shit. That just shows like how nonsense it all is.
Yeah, I'm looking at the sheet now from Warner Brothers, the accounting sheet for Order of the Phoenix, and they like cite a lot of stuff like distribution fees, distribution expenses, direct cost, supervisory fees, over budget charges, like just a bunch of like stuff that just technically keeps the movie in the red. Even though we all know it's not.
No.
Like, it's literally impossible for it to be in the red. Because if it was, they wouldn't keep making more of them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that just goes into, like, I don't know. Like, the movie industry just seems to have, like, very vague, undefined, unrealistic, like, standards for what makes a movie successful.
Yeah.
I mean, just like how, they acted like, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was a box office bomb. And it's like, that movie made like, what, $600 million, $700 million?
It made more than twice its budget back.
Yeah, I don't understand how that's a failure.
Yeah.
Or like, even Superman Returns, and especially like Batman vs. Superman. Batman vs. Superman was like, $900 million. And Patrick Wilson finally had to say, like, you cannot tell me that a movie could be $100 million short of making $1 billion and that it underperformed or failed. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Shit like that pisses me off, though.
Yeah, here's another tweet in that conversation. I guess someone who helped make the show Army Wives years back. They tweeted, Army Wives ran for 7 seasons, and every profit statement from Disney/ABC shows zero profit in the show deeply in the red. I have concluded thus that Disney and ABC is clearly a non-profit entity creating shows and movies for the good of the people.
Yeah. Yeah. almost.
Yeah, it's like all these franchises are in the red, but you're still finding ways to pump out more of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how does something go for, 6, 7 seasons and you claim that it hasn't made a profit yet?
Yeah.
Once again, this isn't necessarily 100% relevant to that, but it just reminds me of like when I was working at the movie theater, and I would have the older customers complain about the prices and how they were too high, they were too much,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, no, they were talking about the concession stand, and like a $5 soda and a $7 bag of popcorn, and I go, well, unfortunately, that's like our only way to make any money and pay the bills here, pay the rent,
Yeah.
is through the concession stand, because the movie studios make virtually a devastating majority of the ticket sales. And the one woman just leans in and goes, really? Like, I just think the most unrealistic thing ever. And it's like, yeah, no, like Disney just totally made the Avengers for free.
Right.
Like just they teamed up with the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
Like, what the
And
for
it's just like,
goodwill.
because I remember when you told me that about how like the theater, like for every ticket sold, you guys made what, like a quarter?
I mean, it's
It was.
it fluctuates over time, but like when a movie is like new,
Hmm.
like it's like 90% of the ticket goes to the movie studio. If I remember being taught correctly.
Yeah.
I remember, my mentor at the time. That was how he explained it to me. But
And
yeah,
does the theater have to pay the studio just to get the movie in the first place?
shoot,
Because if they do, that makes it even more bullshit.
that's actually a really good question. Do they have to pay to get it in the first place? I don't want to answer that because I'm not 100% sure. I do know that, in 2015 even, Disney was trying to, like, I guess, be the big bully on the playground and, like,
Hmm.
have the moxie to tell theaters, like, hey, you have to have more auditoriums of Avengers, Age of Ultron than any other movie, and you have to keep our movie in the bigger theaters. Even though we may not be the newest movie anymore, and it's just like, yo, like, piss off,
Yeah,
like,
it's like you're Disney and it's the Avengers. People are gonna go see it. I don't think you guys have to worry.
yeah. And it's just like, eventually, like, you will not have the newest movie of the week, and
And
like, we'll go to other stuff.
it's like the theater is how you guys make your money. Maybe you shouldn't bite the hand that feeds you. Just saying.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. I
and I mean,
mean,
like, the theaters are kind of getting their comeuppance with all these movies going to video on demand instead of the theaters because of the pandemic, and looking like they might continue that trend at least in some form even after the pandemic.
yeah,
Which it sucks for the theaters and the people who work at them, but
absolutely.
I say that the movie studios kind of brought it on themselves
Um,
in a
I
way.
mean, well,
Maybe
in that,
like in sense of karma. Like they didn't bring the pandemic on us, but
no, well, I mean, in that case, it was the studio being the bully, though, not the movie
well, that's
theaters.
what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I don't know. It's. I feel like it's still too soon, too early to predict what's going to happen. I mean,
Hmm.
like, I think when the day finally does come when everybody feels much better going out
Hmm.
and doing stuff again, I mean, like, you just can't beat that experience. Like,
Yeah,
people miss going to the movie theater. They miss, like, I know it is now a cliche and even cringy to some people on Twitter to still bring it up, but like, opening night of Avengers Endgame, when, the final battle starts and everybody's all excited and cheering and stuff, like, you can't recreate that in a living room with just 5 people. Like,
yeah,
it'll still feel fun with your buddies in your own way, but like, to have 100, 200, like, people in the same big room, like, doing that, like, people miss that feeling.
yeah,
um and I mean, like, there are some things where it's like, yeah, I can just watch that at home, like, Happiest Season that was on Hulu. Like, that's not a movie theater kind of movie,
hmm,
but like, you best believe I'm crossing my fingers that shit is good enough this fall so I can see Dune on the big screen.
yeah.
like anything Marvel, anything DC, like, and I'm not the biggest like Star Wars person, but like, yeah, there's no way I would have just settled for seeing any of the sequel trilogy on the small screen for the first time. That's not how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, let's move away from movies, go into like the comic book industry, because I feel like this kind of stuff of the studio heads taking advantage of the artists and content creators, I feel like it's the worst in the
Yeah,
comic industry.
yeah,
Because I mean, at least in the music industry, the artists still, like Taylor Swift. Yeah, Taylor Swift doesn't own her masters, but I don't think anybody's in doubt that Taylor Swift has a comfortable life. Like
yeah.
Taylor Swift still has money.
And well, and then there are people, and not to I guess like skip ahead or fast forward or whatever. People, Taylor Swift is Taylor Swift. Like people are still rooting for her.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody knew until long after he was dead that Bill Finger even existed.
Yeah,
Like
like
that's really depressing.
yeah, and like the fact that Bob Kane pretty much stole Batman from him, like he stole the man's legacy right out from under him.
And like Bill Finger was into it. Like he created Batman. He was into it. He believed in the messages and morals and like
Mm-hmm.
Bill Finger or Bob Kane. All he wanted to do was make enough money to go to like fancy parties and hang out with like elite people.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's
you know,
like, and I mean, if you guys haven't seen it, there's a great documentary on Hulu about this called Batman and Bill.
yeah,
I highly recommend it. But yeah, like we'll get into it here in a little bit about like the conflict not just between the studio and the creator, but also like the writer and the artist. Because a lot of these famous comic book characters were made by two people, writer and artist. And I feel like I kind of see it from both angles in that regard. Like the question of, does the artist deserve creator credit or ownership credit? And I'm like, on the one hand, we all know what, like you say, Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, everybody immediately has an image in their mind. So it's like that person created an image that like 70, 80 years later, people still mentally immediately recognize. But on the other hand, it's like, with, for example, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko are both credited for creating Spider-Man. And I mean, also Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were credited with a lot of other Marvel characters like the Fantastic Four and the X-Men and all that. Stan Lee never wrote or never drew, I should say, never designed any of those characters. Stan Lee was the writer. And I mean, it's kind of a question of like, for example, Spider-Man. Does Steve Ditko deserve ownership of Spider-Man along with Stan Lee? And it's like, yeah, he created that image that we all immediately recognize. But on the other hand, it's like Stan Lee, like in my opinion, if Stan Lee hadn't been driving the bus, Marvel as we know it would not exist today. And I feel like that's like a fact at this point.
well, I mean, I don't think it takes anything away from Stan Lee to also credit what Steve Ditko is.
Yeah.
I always get him and Jack Kirby mixed up, like who we're talking about at which time. But like, I mean, yeah, I mean that is an industry that completely relies on the visual, the look and aesthetic and everything, and it's just like,
And it's like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just kind of presenting like a counter argument for the sake of having one.
Mhm.
Like, because the thing is, Stan Lee came up with the idea of Spider-Man. He was like, this is the character I have in mind. This is what I want. And Jack Kirby also came up with a design for Spider-Man. Stan Lee hated it and went with Steve's instead. But, like, he could have just as easily went with Jack Kirby's design instead. So, I mean, like, at what point are you actually, are you also co-creator? And, I mean, you're right. It is an industry that relies, like, heavily on the visual. And I guess another counter argument to it is, think of the Harry Potter books. And I know I'm, comparing a novel to a comic book, but I feel like the distinction there's enough of a similarity to make this comparison here with the Harry Potter books, because Harry Potter is like a huge cultural phenomenon, has been since the day it came out. So much so that like the majority of people have those original book covers burned into their mind. Like when you say Harry Potter, that's like one of the first images they think of.
Hmm.
Does the artist of those book covers get any sort of creator or ownership credit of Harry Potter?
No, because I cannot for the life of me think of whoever it was.
Okay, but most people don't know who Steve Ditko is either, so
Yeah, I mean, again, like I understand what you're trying to say, and it's not a nonsense argument. I have to give you that. But we're talking about one image over something that requires, every single page to be a giant image, back to back to back to back to back. So I mean that would be the counter argument, I guess you could say. But I mean, yeah, I mean ultimately it does fall under like um it does ultimately belong to who thought up the character and the world to begin with. But I mean, again, like for a look, for an aesthetic, for a visual that is iconic, and that you know we have the words seared into our brain, but we also have the costume seared in our brain. I think it is fair ultimately for whoever first came up with, the basic blueprint of the outfit and just that entire, style to get some credit. Um, I will say though, I mean, Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby are at least known by more people than whoever the hell made the Harry Potter book covers. Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's just,
I
I,
mean, like I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think,
yeah,
I totally I again, I think it's a fact that if Stan Lee hadn't been driving the bus, Marvel as we know it wouldn't exist. Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, all those other artists, they happened to be working with the right it was the perfect storm. They had Stan Lee driving the bus and driving their direction, being like, this is what I want from you guys, and they delivered. And I mean, they were hired hands, yes. I mean, technically Stan Lee was too, but that's just it. They delivered. And they delivered something that, almost 100 years later is still enduring.
yeah,
So, I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just looking at it from both angles for the sake of looking at it from both angles.
yeah.
But in the case of like Batman, I think Bill Finger deserves that credit more than Bob Kane does because I mean,
Well, because I mean, first of all, it was like Bill Finger's idea
to
to
make
have
him look like
Batman.
to have the character named Batman look like a fucking bat.
Yeah, I mean, like if
Like
it was
when
Bob,
you have to spell it out at that level, you created the character as far as I'm concerned.
yes, exactly. And it was like if it was just up to Bob Kane, he would have just been a ripoff of The Shadow.
And
And
Superman.
yeah. Well, I mean, like I mean, even the original like Batman costume really is just a recolored Superman outfit,
Yeah.
um, just with gloves and a mask.
I just
But,
imagine Bill Finger just looking at me like, well, you called him Batman.
yeah,
Why don't we have him look like a bat?
yeah. And then
And
he
just Bob Kane. Oh, I didn't even think of that.
And then, like, evidently, I think it's like he came up with like the no killing rule, or it's just like he doesn't kill or whatever. Like, I don't know if it's like expressed upon as profoundly as like obviously what Christopher Nolan did with it,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, no, apparently Bob Kane was like cool with him killing people and
Well,
shooting them actually using guns, but like Bill Finger was like, well, no, have him use gadgets, have
yeah.
him use like a grappling hook and like let him use his instincts and detective skills more. No, like at that point, like Bill Finger made Batman,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
Bob Kane
Bill Finger was basically the creative force behind the entire aesthetic of Batman for the longest time. Like the giant like oversized like props that he would have in the Batcave and stuff like that, and
yeah,
just the entire aesthetic of Gotham City. Like that was all Bill Finger,
yeah,
and Bob Kane just took it all from him.
yeah. Just took credit for it. He just wanted to go to shrimp cocktail parties.
I mean, even Stan Lee has said because Stan Lee was like, I knew Bob Kane and I was friends with Bob Kane, and I'll be the first to tell you, Bob Kane was fucking full of himself.
Yeah,
Like Bob Kane thought he was Bruce Wayne.
yeah. Um, shit. I still gotta watch that documentary though.
It's good.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Um,
Um, And then there was like some drama with Superman for the longest time.
Yeah, Jerry
I mean,
Siegel and Joe Shuster, they created Superman and multiple times tried to sue DC Comics to get Superman back.
hmm and then so much that like their heirs, their families went after him, and there was like that was one of the reasons why there wasn't a Superman movie for several years.
Yeah,
Because it just was this back and forth. Um, but I mean, yeah, that would have been wild if they won and
yeah,
they could have like created a deal with another studio, another entity to
yeah.
make Superman movies with.
Well, it's weird because it's like those two guys, Siegel and Schuster, they when they created Superman, they sold Superman to DC in exchange for some money and a contract to basically keep providing them with Superman stories.
Yeah.
And when they tried to, like 10 years later, they tried to sue DC to get Superman, the rights to Superman back. And the judge was like, well, no, you sold it to them. They bought it from you. They own it. And I guess in that regards, you could kind of side with DC because it's like, yeah, they bought it fair and square. And it's just kind of like a case of sour grapes almost where it's like, oh, we didn't know it was going to be this fucking big of a,
Buyer's
icon.
remorse. Yeah, almost.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like these two guys created basically the entire comic industry. Superman was the first superhero, essentially.
Yeah.
At least in terms of how we currently know it. Without Superman, there would not be this wonderful industry that we all have come to love.
Yeah.
And the fact that those two guys like struggled in poverty for so long is not okay. It's not right for somebody to make something that is such a huge part of the lexicon and has motivated and inspired so many people over almost 100 years to like live the rough life they did. That's not cool.
No, I mean like if you have a company, a corporate entity that ultimately owns a character, like yeah, whatever, but you still have a moral obligation to take care of the people that made it possible for you to have that.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm like relying on big businessmen to be fucking saints, but I don't know. It just seems like common sense.
Yeah.
It's like, it's one thing for them to be like, no, I always want to have complete 100% control over, where you use this character, how you use them. I don't personally believe in video games, so you can't put them in a video game. And it's like, tough shit. Like, I
Yeah.
know I just made up an argument out of nowhere, but like, it's just like, in that case, it's like, no, it's tough shit. Like, they want to use your character as much as possible. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like kind of the thing I have with like Alan Moore.
Oh
Like,
God. Yeah.
Alan Moore, it's just like, does Alan Moore deserve to get paid? Like, absolutely. I don't know if that's like, from my understanding, he also just like for a principle, he's like one of those people where it's like, it's the principle of the matter. It's just like, he was so fucking offended that like before Watchmen was made, the prequel books,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like, dude, like you created characters for a company, a brand, a label, and they're popular, and that company doesn't want those characters to just be a one and done deal. They want to use them in other stuff.
Well,
Like,
DC even offered him to come back to make Before Watchmen, and he turned it down.
yeah, and it's just like, dude, like that just falls under the umbrella of tough shit. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. Like you made popular characters, and the studios that own them like want to use them. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, back to the creators of Superman. I guess you could kind of say that situation's a bit of buyer's remorse, but even when you boil it down to that, DC still took advantage of those two guys because they were just like, they made a deal where they were like, we're gonna completely own this character that you made. And I mean, no matter the context, that's just straight up not okay.
no, it's not okay. Like,
And it ended up inspiring, all the other comic industries to do the same thing to everybody else. Up
yeah,
until now, the present day, they're still doing it.
yeah. I mean, you should not be responsible for creating something that is big and loved and popular and famous and cherished and be hungry. Like
Yeah.
that's just wrong.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But I mean, like, go into like Image Comics, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, before we even go into that, like, to kind of go back to Stan Lee and all them, like, everybody knows who Stan Lee is, you know. Everybody recognized Stan Lee, recognized his voice, and immediately knew who he was. But the thing that a lot of, you know, people never realized, because I remember I had to explain it to my ex once, like, Stan Lee never owned any of the characters he made.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, Stan Lee didn't toil in poverty for sure. He was very comfortable in life.
Yeah.
But like all the money he made was not. I mean, I'm sure he got paid like something. He got paid his salary from Marvel for sure, especially as he climbed through the ranks to eventually become president of Marvel for a while. But yeah, Stan Lee never owned Spider-Man. He never owned X-Men, Doctor Strange. Like the second he came up with those characters, they belonged to Marvel, and that's how it's been at DC. And it's just crazy that that has just been allowed to go on like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that kind of stuff is what caused, you mentioned Image Comics, that kind of stuff is what caused the creation of Image Comics in the 90s. A bunch of artists who were working at Marvel at the time, you know, a couple big names like Todd McFarlane being the biggest one, and also, you know, Rob Liefeld, creator of Deadpool, being, you know, right behind him. You know, a team of them, of these artists at Marvel, were tired of making these characters for Marvel, because like this was during like the late 80s to mid 90s, or early 90s I should say, when this was going on. And during that time, Marvel had like kind of a renaissance going on with all these new characters coming out, like Deadpool, Venom, the New Mutants, like all these new characters that, you know, caused Marvel to really blow up at the time. And these artists were like, you know, we've made all these characters and we're not like seeing shit from it. So they had a meeting with the president of Marvel at the time, and they didn't make any demands or anything. They just straight up told him like, we're done, we're walking out. And the next day, this is how adamant they were about this. The next day, they had a meeting with the president of DC Comics and told him the same thing. Like, they just straight up told him, like, hey, we're just letting you know we quit Marvel, and before you guys even ask, we're just letting you know we're not going to work for you either for the same reasons. And they went and they started their own studio, Image Comics. And Image is, you know, very different business model than Marvel and DC, whereas Image is strictly the publisher. The studio and the creator of the character owns the character. Image simply publishes it. And I mean, Image, their biggest properties, of course, are Spawn, which is made by Todd McFarlane, and also The Walking Dead. And Image doesn't own those. They just publish the comic, and that is literally all they do.
Aren't they the ones that published the Ninja Turtles too?
For a bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I mean, that's very ballsy of those guys to do, just walk away like that and make their own publishing company that completely went against the norm of the business.
It's boss moves in American history.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a shame that Image Comics aren't as big as what they were in the 90s. So, I mean, especially Spawn. I'm a huge fan of Spawn, and Todd McFarlane's my favorite artist of all time. I mean, they got The Walking Dead, but I think The Walking Dead comic recently ended.
I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah, me either. I just don't follow The Walking Dead, but
Nah.
it is a shame that like Image Comics has kind of lost a bit of its luster, because it's like it'd be so great to see them shake up the industry so much that Marvel and DC start following that kind of business practice too.
Yeah, it would be nice. I mean, like, and it's not that. I mean, I understand they got to make money themselves, but it's just like it would only be good press for you to just take care of your people.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if you take care of your people, they might be more inclined to make more stuff to make you more money. I mean,
Yeah.
This isn't rocket science, guys. Like,
No. I mean, like, they would be, they would be more likely to like bring in other people, like, hey, work for the people I'm working with right now,
right.
and whatnot. But I mean, shit, that just requires too much hoping that other people aren't a piece of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy how like all these different big studio heads, big record labels and all that, like the second you make something for them, you belong to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of like another like instance of it with a movie that I mean, shit. Oh man.
I mean, it's kind of crazy how Disney had to buy Fox to get the full rights to A New Hope.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people weren't aware of that. That went into that. Like, Fox, 20th Century Fox would have owned A New Hope forever, no matter what.
Yeah.
Um, so
Wasn't it distribution rights?
I guess, but instead of just simply being like, all right, how much do you want for A New Hope and the rest of Marvel, whatever you have of Marvel, like the X-Men, they're just like, let's buy everything. And
Yeah.
and now it's like, okay, you know, small town mom and pop indie theaters can't show Home Alone every Christmas anymore. They can't show like double features of Alien and Predator, and it's just like, what the fuck, Disney? Like,
Yeah.
shit, like, oh yeah, because I forgot that they're gonna put the entire Predator saga on Disney Plus. Like, eat shit.
Yeah, Disney fucking had the audacity to do that and not even cancel Fox News.
Oh man, I mean that's the only way I would have supported that whole deal.
Yeah.
But once again, I mean, we've said it multiple times on this very podcast, but the majority of an industry should not be owned and controlled by the same entity. I shouldn't have to explain why that's a very bad idea. Like,
Yeah.
uh, oh man. Hmm.
Well, we went through the whole list I made up for this topic. I mean, you have anything else you want to add?
I mean, I'm rooting for Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Um,
Rooting for Kesha.
I'm rooting,
Nobody should have to work with somebody who straight up causes them to have anxiety attacks.
yeah, I mean, trauma and just, yes. No, I mean, an abuser, an assaulter, like, the hell with them.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, no, honestly, like, I love Taylor Swift. Like, at first I wasn't into her, especially I wasn't into her earlier music, but like, she only got better as time went on for me personally. And again, like, I know we all partook in the giggling of that meme where it's like, she waves at a boy at the bus stop who doesn't wave back. Her new album will be out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, but no, man, like, she's a queen, and stomps all them fuckers. And it's just weird how, like, imagine 2009 being like, watching the MTV Awards, and Kanye West did that shit where he's like, Kesha, I'm gonna let you, or Taylor Swift, I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had the best album of all time, and like did his rude shit to her, and then back and forth, like she was like the country singer and everything, and it's like, hey, guess what? 11 years from now, he's gonna be wearing the hat of the Republican president, and she's gonna be backing all the Democrats who run. And it's just like, life is just full of twists and turns.
Hey, speaking of that, aren't you looking forward to tomorrow?
I mean, I saw a tweet that summed it all up. Like, tonight we are all Stormy Daniels. We're just waiting for him to finish up so we can get some sleep.
Yeah. Hey, today is the last day that a woman was not in the White House.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm just praying to God for no bullshit right now.
Oh,
Um,
something's gonna happen tomorrow. Something's gonna be attempted, I should say, but I don't think anything serious is gonna happen.
oh goodness, I hope what you just said doesn't age bad. I'm
I mean,
just,
look, despite all the flaws of the American government, they aren't gonna be caught with their pants down a second time.
I'm praying to God that doesn't age bad. Oh shit. But yeah, I mean, tonight is the last night Donald Trump's president.
Yep. See you in hell.
Well, hopefully not. I don't want to go there.
I don't know if I have much say in the matter. I might need you. To pray twice as hard.
Oh shit. And but it's what in some ways, like the last 4 years, they felt like forever, but then they went by really fast. It's weird. Like in some ways it was fast, and in other ways it was slow.
Yeah. Hey, you want to talk about things aging badly? Remember in 2016 when Ben Carson said, "Hey, it's only 4 years, guys. What's the worst he could do?"
Oh shit. Shit. And then you have it's still wild to me that apparently Ben Shapiro did not vote for him the first time, but he voted for him this time. And if anything, that's crazier to me. It's like you weren't sold on him before, but then after all this, you're like, yeah, more please.
Right?
And one of his things was, let's just face it, guys, the damage has already been done. Like the worst that can happen has already happened. And it's like, dude, you are just such an idiot. I hate you. You think everything women do is awkward and uncomfortable and cringy. It's just like, no, dude, you hate women because women probably hate you. I mean, God, if I had to hear you every night, I'd be dry also. Oh,
God damn.
I can't wait for an episode where we can roast him and Steven Crowder the whole time.
I'll be sure to invite them both on the show.
Why? So I can tell him that I'm a sand trap downstairs?
You take Ben Shapiro, I'll take Steven Crowder.
Oh, shoot.
Trust me, that's the correct matchup. Trust me.
I don't know if I can talk that fast. But, oh man, I don't know. No, you know what? We should offer to do it in person, and then with Steven Crowder, we just bring all those union workers that wanted to beat the fuck out of him.
All right, I'm going to tell you right now, if Steven Crowder ever invites us on his show, I will accept. Just so I can take a shit on his floor live on Facebook. Or wherever the hell he streams that garbage.
It's like his it's his girlfriend's basement or whatever. I don't know.
Ma, meatloaf.
Apparently he has a girlfriend that is a model in the fashion industry, but she tries to keep her, I don't think he's ever mentioned her by name. And it's giving off huge vibes of, I have a girlfriend, she just goes to a different school than us.
Yeah.
She's from the Niagara Falls area.
Yeah, all right, Napoleon. This is my girlfriend.
You mean Kip?
No, that was Napoleon. He had the picture of a random model that he stole from Deb's basement. He's like, this is my girlfriend. I'm taking her to prom. She lives out of state.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh shoot! But
no, Kip actually had a girlfriend.
Yeah, that's true though. That's true. I'm sorry, Kip. He's my soulmate. Oh man.
Don't be angry because I've been here talking to internet babes all day.
It's a piece of junk. It doesn't work. Why?
I could have told you that. How do we go from Taylor Swift to this?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
You tried. You tried. God bless you. You tried.
Yeah. But, well, I think that's a good
Bob
night.
was listening.
No, but Bob was listening. I think that's a good night. Unless you have anything else to add.
No, I think we had a nice little episode here tonight.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, just as a final recap, it's weird. Oh, another good example was Dave Chappelle with Chappelle's Show.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That went on Netflix and HBO Max, and he did not make anything off of it.
Yeah,
and then he had that Instagram stand-up where he was like, boycott me. I'm not asking you to boycott a studio. I'm asking you to boycott me.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Netflix took it down, and didn't HBO take it down too?
They finally took it down because he told the dirt on HBO that was shitty, where he pitched Chappelle's Show to HBO before Comedy Central, and they looked at him and said, what do we need you for? And they kicked him out. Instead of just being like, no thanks, no thank you, they looked at him and they said, what do we need you for?
Wow.
And then he's like, you know what? 20 years later, They are streaming the show that I pitched them, and I'm not getting anything for it. So let me ask them, what do you need from me?
Oh man, I'm so glad I'm not paying for the HBO account on my PS4.
Shit.
Special shout out to previous guest Kyle Rayos for that.
Man, countdown to the Snyder Cut. And this is like, this week we're reminded that the Snyder Cut will be 30 whole minutes longer than The Irishman.
I still haven't watched The Irishman. I've been meaning to since it came out, and I never have.
I mean, it's a good enough cast, but I'm sorry, I did that thing where like I thought I was, about to say goodbye, and then I'm like, oh, and another thing, but no, man, like every now and then it's good to have a short episode, and by short I mean like still over an hour, but
No, we haven't hit an hour yet.
oh really?
We're at 55 minutes.
Oh man, well, let's keep this record, but I am BVJ. You can find me online at Bukasaucy. I recently came out with a piece that was an ode to Hot Rod. Please check that out. Retweet it, like it, share it, whatever. And yeah, hopefully I'll have another art piece coming out very soon, just in time for Valentine's Day.
Oh, Pookie.
I'm not drawing a booty. I'm sorry.
Well, what good are you then?
Well, shoot, I'm still trying to figure that out. Anything else, Donnie?
I mean, you ain't drawing a booty. It's like you guys don't understand why I'm upset. Like you haven't lived until you see this man's booty in a pair of Oscar the Grouch undies. Like,
yeah. That was because okay. Now I need to add some context. That was because I was like in my loungewear for the evening, and our friend Trevor he called and did a FaceTime. And then I was just like, I put the phone down. I'm like, hold on, guys. I'm going to go get some ice cream. And I forgot I was in that. I did not randomly, like, sex Donnie some pictures of me and some Oscar the Grouch. Oscar Braves just to be like, hey, man, don't you miss this every Sunday?
oh man, oh it's fitting you were wearing Oscar the Grouch because that was a straight up dumper.
And then Kogel, of course, had to be like, he's got the dummy thick shorts on. And I'm just like, man, I'm just trying to get some Oreo ice cream. And Kogel goes, he got that ass edible. Call her Mr. Incredible.
Ugh. What a fucking night.
Oh, man. I got to take the recycling out there, bro.
All right. Well, I am Don John. You can follow me on Twitter at Don John Laughs. Be sure to follow the Fat Minute at Fat Minute Radio. If you missed this episode or tuned in late, we'll be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the streaming services tomorrow. So be sure to come back Sunday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our next episode. And on that note, be good, be safe. Thank you. Fuck you. Goodbye.
Good night.